So I will be doing the analysis on Kubla Khan by Samuel Taylor Coleridge. So a little bit of background on this poem. Uh, Coleridge had actually been reading a novel called Purchase Pilgrims, which was written in the 17th century, and it was essentially a book about Marco Polo's travels, especially to the Mongolian Empire. And also, while he was reading this, he had a massive headache, and the doctors prescribed him anodyne, which was also opium. And this opium completely knocked him out, and he had a dream that would eventually become his poem. And when he woke up, he recalls that he could remember 300 lines of this dream, and he wanted to write it all down, but unfortunately, he had gotten sidetracked and only written down 54 lines, which is why it says, let me see, or a vision in a dream, a fragment. So the poem starts out by saying, and Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree. So Xanadu is another word for a place of extreme beauty or pleasure, and then Kubla Khan is the grandson, Kubla Khan was the grandson of Genghis Khan, and he was the ruler of the Yuan dynasty in China. Then it says a stately pleasure dome decree. So he's talking about essentially like a magnificent dome, kind of like a utopia. And then it says where Alf, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man, to the sunless sea. So the river Alf has a metaphorical significance. Some people believe that the river Alf represents God, while others believe that it represents human creativity. So the people that believe that it represents God, they draw it from the name Alf, which sounds like the word alpha, and in the biblical book of Revelations, God talks about how he is the Alpha and the Omega, which is the beginning and the ending. And then for the people believe that the river the river represents human creativity, believe that the speaker is interested in the hidden irrational parts of the human mind, which is represented when they talk about the river going through caverns, measureless to man. So moving on, it says, so twice 5 miles of fertile ground, with walls and towers of girdled ground, and there were gardens bright with sinuous rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree, and here were forests ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. So you'll notice that I highlighted the word fertile, gardens, incense-bearing tree, and forest, and then I'll also underline greenery, or blossomed. So these words really stuck out to me because it kind of almost sounds like the biblical Garden of Eden, very like a utopia, and this was very important to romantic writers. They really stressed an emphasis to nature. And then, so moving on to the second stanza, it says, but oh, that deep romantic chasm, which slanted down the green hill athwart the cedarn cover, a savage place as holy and enchanted as beneath the waning moon was haunted by woman wailing for her demon lover. So they're basically talking about right here where it says a deep romantic chasm, they're talking about a geyser that splits between two trees. And then it also talks about how this place is so sacred that it could possibly be haunted. And then it says, and from this chasm with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth in fast thick pants were breathing. So they're kind of just, the speaker is kind of personifying the geyser. And it says, a mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose shift half intermitted burst, huge fragments bolted like rebounding hail, or a chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail. And mid these dancing rocks at once and ever it flung up momentarily the sacred river. So they're talking, the speaker's talking about how the geyser spews both rock and holy water from the river. And then moving on, it says 5 miles meandering with mazy motion through the wood and dale the sacred river ran, and reached the caverns to measureless man. It sank in tumult to the lifeless ocean. So it's talking about how the river flows for 5 miles through the woods before reaching the icy caves, and then it'll reach the calm ocean. So moving on, it says, and mid this tumult Kubla heard from far ancestral voices prophesizing war. So he's saying that when he listens to the river closely, he can actually hear the voices of his ancestors predicting when war will come upon them. And then it says, the shadow of the dome of pleasure floating midway in the waves, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountain in the caves. It was a miracle red of ice, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. So you'll notice that he's being very specific with the way he's describing the scenery. He's not just saying that it's beautiful, he's going very in depth, which I found to be very interesting. So moving on to the third stanza, it says, a damsel with a dulcimer, and a damsel means unmarried woman, and then a dulcimer was a stringed instrument. So a damsel with a dulcimer, in a vision I once saw, it was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. So Abyssinian maid, Abyssinia was in modern day Ethiopia. So he's referring to an Ethiopian woman playing or singing about Mount Abora, which is obviously in Ethiopia. And then he's saying, could I revive within me her symphony and song? Too much a deep delight would win me. So he's talking about that if he could revive, or if he could recreate this song, that maybe he could remember the whole 300 lines that he had originally wanted to write down. That's what I got from it. So let me see here. To such a deep delight would win me, that with the music long and loud, I would build that dome in the air. So he's saying that if he heard her music, he would build what he described in the air this time. That sunny dome, those caves of ice, and all who heard should see them there. And all should cry, beware, beware, his flashing eyes and floating hair. So that kind of, it seems to me that he's kind of describing himself to be some sort of god. Yeah, sounds to me like he's kind of relating himself to a god. And then it says, lastly it says, weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honeydew hath fed and drunk the milk of paradise. So right there, the ending, it kind of reminds me of the biblical Exodus story about like Moses in the Promised Land, where it talks about honeydew and then the milk of paradise. And then backing up a little bit, it says his flashing eyes and floating hair. So in the Old Testament, in the Bible, usually when people would see God, they were to close their eyes upon viewing him. And so, what I got out of this poem is that I think that Samuel thought that he, like, if he remembered the 300 lines, that he would feel as though he would have created a true piece of art. He believes that like, if he remembered his dream perfectly, he could kind of be godlike, or just the speaker in general of the poem, and that he could create perfection. This is a really good poem. There's a lot of alliteration in here, like where it says, so twice 5 miles of fertile ground. So for there, he could have used 10 miles, but instead he said twice 5 miles of fertile ground, so we could really hear that F sound. And then, there's many more examples, but another one would be like, like a damsel with a dulcimer, or her symphony and song, or that with music loud and long. He uses a lot of that to really get his message across. And overall, it was just a very lovely poem to read. Thank you.